The HOA Cop's megaphone screeched, "Turn around, or I'll fine you into next week." It was the kind of petty threat that made Frank, a retired Army Ranger, wonder if bureaucracy had finally lost its mind. In the quiet cul-de-sac of Willow Grove, where manicured lawns and nosy neighbors reigned supreme, a storm was brewing, one that would expose the absurdity of power, the weight of karma, and the fire of a man who'd seen real battles, not just clipboard crusades. Frank Miller, 62, had moved to Willow Grove for peace after decades of service, first in the jungles of Vietnam, then in the deserts of Iraq. His modest ranch-style home, with its slightly overgrown lawn and unpainted mailbox, was his sanctuary. But to the Willow Grove Homeowners Association, it was a crime scene. The HOA, led by the self-appointed enforcer, Kevin HOA Cop Larson, had made it their mission to nitpick every blade of grass out of line. Frank's sin: his mailbox leaned 2 degrees too far to the left, and his grass was a quarter-inch past regulation height. The notices piled up, each one more condescending than the last, until Larson decided to escalate things with a personal visit. That humid June evening, Larson stormed down the street in his tactical vest, a garish black thing with HOA emblazoned across the chest and his name stitched in bold. He looked like a mall cop playing soldier, his clipboard clutched like a shield. Neighbors whispered from their porches, sensing a spectacle. Frank was on his front lawn, raking leaves, when Larson barked, "Miller, turn around. You're in violation of Code 47B. Frank froze, his grip tightening on the rake. He'd faced down insurgents, survived ambushes, and carried wounded comrades through hellfire. This was a joke, but the kind that made his blood boil. "You're serious," Frank said, turning slowly, his voice low but sharp enough to cut glass, his eyes hardened by years of combat, locked onto Larson's. The younger man flinched but doubled down, puffing out his chest. "You've got 24 hours to fix that mailbox, or I'm slapping you with a $500 fine." And that lawn disgraceful, the crowd grew neighbors like Mrs. Jenkins, who'd once called Frank a hero for fixing her fence, and Tim, the teenager who mowed lawns for extra cash. They watched, some amused, others outraged, as Larson's tirade grew louder. What Larson didn't know was that Frank wasn't just any retiree. He was a man who'd earned 3 Purple Hearts, a Silver Star, and a reputation for never backing down. The HOA's petty rules were nothing compared to the chaos he'd survived. But Larson's arrogance, his assumption that a badge and a vest gave him ultimate authority, lit a fuse in Frank. "You're standing on my property, son," Frank said, stepping closer. "You don't get to play general here." The air crackled with tension, and the crowd held its breath. Larson, oblivious to the danger, jabbed a finger at Frank. "You think you're above the rules? This is Willow Grove, not some war zone. Fix your damn mailbox, or I'll have the board foreclose on your house." The threat was absurd, but it hit a nerve. Foreclosure for a mailbox. The neighbors gasped, and Tim, the teenager, started filming on his phone. Frank's jaw tightened, but he didn't flinch. Instead, he smiled a cold, calculated smile that made Larson take a step back. "You ever been in a real fight?" Kevin Frank asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Not with a clipboard, with someone who knows how to hit back." The standoff was electric. Larson, red-faced and sweating, tried to regain control. "Don't make me call the real cops," he shouted, but his voice cracked. Frank didn't move, his stance relaxed yet coiled, like a panther ready to strike. The neighbors were no longer just watching, they were choosing sides. "Mrs. Jenkins yelled, "Leave him alone." "Kevin, he's a veteran." Tim's video was already streaming to the neighborhood's social media group, and comments flooded in HOAs gone too far. "Frank's a hero, Larson's a bully." The public's outrage was building, a wave ready to crash. This wasn't just about a mailbox anymore. It was about power, control, and the kind of petty tyranny that festers in quiet suburbs. Larson represented every overzealous rule enforcer who'd ever made life miserable for no reason. Frank, on the other hand, was a symbol of resilience, a man who'd fought for freedom only to face a new kind of oppression in his own backyard. The crowd's murmurs grew into shouts, and Larson, sensing the tide turning, made a fatal mistake. He reached for his phone to call for backup, but in his haste, he dropped it. The clatter on the pavement felt like a gunshot. Frank didn't need to raise his voice. "You want to talk rules," he said, stepping closer, his presence towering despite his age. "Let's talk about respect. You don't get to threaten a man's home because you don't like his grass." The crowd roared in agreement, and Larson's bravado crumbled. He stammered, "This isn't over." Miller, but his retreat to his HOA-branded golf cart was as good as a surrender. Tim's video went viral within hours, racking up thousands of views on X and sparking a firestorm of debate. HOA Cop became a meme, a symbol of everything wrong with suburban bureaucracy. The aftermath was chaos. The Willow Grove HOA board called an emergency meeting, but the damage was done. Neighbors, emboldened by Frank's defiance, started questioning every rule in the 200-page HOA handbook. Why did they need permission to plant roses? Why were fines for minor violations so steep? The board, led by Larson's cronies, tried to double down, issuing a statement defending their community standards. But the public wasn't having it. X posts flooded with stories of HOA abuses from across the country, families fined for kids' chalk drawings, veterans harassed for flagpoles. Frank's story became a rallying cry. Frank, meanwhile, didn't care about the fame. He fixed his mailbox not because of Larson, but because he wanted to. He mowed his lawn too, but left one patch slightly longer, a quiet middle finger to the HOA. At the next board meeting, neighbors packed the room, demanding Larson's resignation. Mrs. Jenkins presented a petition with 300 signatures, and Tim showed a montage of Larson's overzealous enforcement, edited from months of footage. The board caved, and Larson was demoted to community liaison, a meaningless title with no power. The real victory, though, was the shift in Willow Grove. The HOA's iron grip loosened, and neighbors started talking to each other again, not just about rules, but about life. Frank's stand had exposed the fragility of petty authority and the power of standing up. He didn't set out to be a hero, but he'd reminded everyone that courage doesn't retire. The viral video, the handwritten sign reading HOA tyranny, ends here on a neighbor's fence, and the community's newfound unity were proof that one man's defiance could rewrite the rules. Karma, it turned out, wasn't just a concept, it was a force, and it hit Larson like a freight train. The story didn't end with Frank's victory. It spread, inspiring others to challenge their own HOAs, to question the systems that thrive on control rather than community. Frank, ever the soldier, stayed humble, but his neighbors never forgot. They started calling him the Ranger, and every time Larson drove by in his golf cart, he avoided Frank's street. The message was clear: some battles aren't won with guns or fists, but with the quiet strength of a man who knows his worth. What's your Willow Grove stand-up? Speak out and take back your freedom.